For more than a century, a single beverage defined the Motor City. Step inside any Michigan shop, local restaurant, or household, and folks with tummy aches were all handed the exact same remedy: Vernors Ginger Ale. Bright amber, incredibly bubbly, featuring a spicy kick strong enough to open your airways. That Woodward Avenue production plant stood as a true Detroit landmark. A glowing 55-foot electric Sprite tipping soda into a glass illuminated the waterside just like a lighthouse. Indoors, crews packaged 6 million units daily, hitting 1,000 containers per minute. Transparent barriers allowed parents and kids to view the assembly process while enjoying creamy chilled beverages nearby. Employees dedicated 30 years to that packaging machinery, eventually teaching their own boys to take over. That facility stood its ground since the American Civil War, seeming just as unshakable as the local waterway itself. But 1966 flipped the script completely. The founders auctioned off the business right on its 100th anniversary. 100 years of independent control vanished overnight. The next 19 years brought nothing but absolute corporate destruction. 5 separate buyers took charge, with each aggressively slashing budgets further. Genuine cane sweetener morphed into processed corn syrup. Authentic spice extracts eventually devolved into generic natural flavorings. 4 years of resting inside wooden casks dropped to 3, eventually becoming pure fiction. That unique recipe driving its beloved taste was ruined. Come January 18, 1985, the hometown plant manufactured its final batch of the classic soda. Staff got dismissed permanently. The structure remained totally vacant for 2 years until demolition crews leveled the place. Here is the tale behind ruthless capitalism ruining a beloved Midwestern beverage. That original plant vanished. The magic recipe disappeared. Those loyal employees packed up forever. Today's remaining liquid lacks the healing magic your grandma always bragged about. Now only the famous branding survives. Chapter 1. The druggist behind the city's signature pop. James Vernor entered the world on April 11, 1843, upstate in Albany, New York. At 5 years of age, his parents relocated them down to Detroit, Michigan. The kid matured in a bustling metropolis that remained pretty unpolished back then. Dirt roads, timber footpaths, basically a wild settlement, pushing hard to evolve into a real urban center. By 1858, a 15-year-old Vernor landed his initial steady gig running errands for the Higbee and Stern Pharmacy along Woodward Avenue. The duties were definitely not fancy. He packaged orders, dropped off supplies, cleaned the floors, handling anything those chemists asked of him. Yet the young guy proved quick, dependable, and highly eager. Management paid attention. After several seasons, they bumped him up to junior clerk, letting him study the medicinal craft. Soon after the Civil War broke out, around 1862, a 19-year-old James joined up with the 4th Michigan Cavalry Division. His duty involved managing the field hospital, meaning he tracked health equipment, helped the doctors out, and nursed injured troops back to health. That 4th Michigan Cavalry proved themselves a highly respected squad. They even battled during the legendary clash at Gettysburg. The group joined General Sherman during his famous March to the Ocean. These troops actually helped apprehend rebel leader Jefferson Davis down in Georgia by 1865. Vernor climbed the military ladder, hitting 2nd lieutenant prior to getting honorably discharged on July 1, 1865. The famous myth surrounding the soda's origins claims that right before shipping out to combat, James had been tinkering with a spiced beverage recipe at work. The story claims he stashed his test mixture inside a wooden cask, marched off to battle, then came back 4 years later to crack the container open, realizing the long storage somehow created absolute perfection. That makes for an amazing tall tale. It's also completely fabricated. The inventor's own kid, James Jr., confessed during a 1936 press chat that his dad never finalized the concoction until peacetime resumed. Another 1962 interview with corporate boss James Davis verified this. Official 1911 trademark paperwork proves the drink hit shelves around 1880 rather than 1866. Still, that romantic wooden cask myth evolved into corporate gospel. They stamped the lore across bottles and marketing campaigns for ages. Reality proved far more mundane. James merely toyed around with spice tonic variations at his shop post-deployment, ultimately stumbling onto an incredibly unique flavor profile. Back in 1866, right after finishing his service, the veteran launched a personal drugstore at 235 Woodward Avenue, sitting squarely at Clifford Street's southwest intersection. His business featured an in-house beverage counter. Nearly every apothecary operated one back then. Chemists routinely blended therapeutic elixirs, leaving the boundary separating health remedies from tasty treats pretty vague. Vernors' signature Fizz originally debuted as just another health potion. Spice extracts settled the gut-sweet bean, notes added richness, and bubbly seltzer made the whole thing palatable. He poured it fresh for patrons directly over his shop's counter. This concoction was a massive hit. Folks testing out the mixture constantly returned for refills, ignoring any health ailments simply because the stuff tasted downright incredible. The blend stood miles apart from whatever rival sodas dominated the contemporary market. Extra spice packed a serious punch, while rich sweetness and wooden barrel resting periods introduced a smooth finish that competing beverages completely missed. James began marketing the batch as deliciously distinct. That catchphrase caught on instantly. Once rumors circulated, neighborhood drugstores desperately begged to stock his creation. Creating a unique franchising model, Verer offered his flavor concentrate to vendors provided they utilized his specific machinery and adhered strictly to his formula. Establishments pouring Verer's beverages showcased elaborate stucco designs, unique illumination, alongside custom ironwork bearing a V motif. A handful of these classic dispensers remain intact today, reflecting his absolute obsession with excellence. Crafting this beverage demanded the identical precision he applied to pharmacy orders, meaning he carefully evaluated every single component. Even the sparkling water underwent a specialized filtration process that he personally co-invented. As the state's very first certified pharmacist, he possessed Michigan Pharmacy License Number 1. He also co-established the Michigan Board of Pharmacy in 1887, remaining a member for 8 years. He ultimately spearheaded the legislative push for the state's initial pharmaceutical regulations. His signature practically guaranteed superiority. Beyond his apothecary work, James Verer heavily influenced local community affairs. Spending 25 years on the Detroit Common Council, he frequently found himself at odds with Mayor Hazen Pingree regarding mass transit policies. While the mayor advocated for public utilities, the pharmacists championed private businesses. Their constant, highly visible disputes never resulted in a compromise. The city honored his public service by dedicating Detroit's Verer Highway to him. Nearing his early 50s by 1896, the inventor realized his signature beverage had completely eclipsed his medical practice. Consequently, he chose to shut down the apothecary shop forever. Shifting his complete attention to the soft drink, he launched a centralized Woodward Avenue facility just south of Jefferson Avenue, right by the Detroit River boat terminals. This venue functioned purely as a modest packaging hub and tasting room for his brand. That exact year, James Verer II officially entered the family operation full-time. The duo tackled grueling 16-hour shifts together, scrubbing glass, blending flavors, and dropping off inventory to partner locations town-wide. As the company expanded in tandem with the metropolis, the Verer's brand essentially morphed into synonymous with Detroit. Chapter 2. Constructing a local icon. That compact riverfront facility quickly proved unable to satisfy the skyrocketing public appetite. Entering the early 1900s, distribution had spread across Michigan and crossed state lines, proving the sheer brilliance of his licensing strategy. Though drugstores across every major Midwestern hub poured the beverage, actual manufacturing remained surprisingly limited. However, a massive shift loomed on the horizon. Adopting the motto "Detroit's Drink" in the early 1900s reflected absolute reality, not just clever advertising. The soda deeply embedded itself into local culture. Spotting its iconic emblem along Woodward Avenue was practically guaranteed. The refreshment permeated everything: diners, private residences, outdoor gatherings, and weekend celebrations. Countless local youths grew up on it. Between 1918 and 1919, management expanded aggressively. Management acquired the sprawling former Riverside Power Plant situated directly along the waterfront at the very bottom of Woodward Avenue. Transforming this gigantic structure into a highly advanced factory, they utilized gravitational pull to naturally guide containers down the assembly line. Glassware began on the uppermost level, descending continuously past dedicated zones for sanitizing, liquid injection, sealing, and sticker application, before emerging at ground level, fully boxed for delivery. The setup was remarkably clever and streamlined. An enormous neon billboard eventually topped the facility, easily seen by boaters and even residents looking over from Windsor, Canada. Projecting the bright insignia against the city's night sky, this display quickly became an unmistakable monument. Folks riding ferries bound for Windsor, Boblo Island, or Belle Isle recognized the glowing beacon as the hometown soda headquarters, filling them with intense local pride. During the 1920s and 1930s, Continuous growth allowed the waterfront complex to eventually consume an entire city block. Within those walls, an elegant marble counter poured fresh glasses for both employees and passing guests. Thousands dropped by daily, including tourists, residents, and families. Grabbing a cold drink from the plant's tap prior to hopping on the Boblo amusement park boat evolved into a cherished local ritual shared by countless family generations. On October 29, 1927, 84-year-old James Vernors Sr. succumbed to a bout of pneumonia and influenza, passing away at his residence on Grosse Ile, a tiny island town situated just south of the metropolis. He was later interred at Detroit's Woodmere Cemetery. James Vernors II assumed the presidency, taking charge of the enterprise that defined his father's entire existence. Whenever relatives questioned exactly when the original founder stepped down from his duties, the response was simply mere hours before his passing. Dedicated to the very end. Guided by James Vernors II's vision, the corporation maintained its relentless growth. By 1939, management purchased the neighboring Siegel property, giving them two distinct waterfront facilities strictly devoted to brewing their signature soda. That brilliant rooftop marquee and the sprawling facilities firmly anchored the city's architectural horizon. Far beyond a simple commercial venture, the brand stood as a cultural pillar, with the riverfront plant hitting maximum production during the 1940s. Hosting thousands of eager guests every single day, the facility offered guided walkthroughs, assembly line viewing, and freshly poured beverages right from their tap room. Functioning as a major travel hotspot, the constantly humming complex remained an incredibly vital and dynamic piece of everyday urban life. Around this period, folks created the Boston Cooler, which basically combines Vernors and creamy vanilla ice cream. It acts just like a regular soda float, yet the title's origins remain completely unknown. People sometimes say Detroit's Boston Boulevard inspired the title, yet that road didn't even exist before the beverage debuted. It makes more sense that during the early 1900s, folks used the phrase for any soda float. Motor City locals just used Vernors, making it a permanent staple. This frosty treat became just as crucial to Motor City culture as the ginger ale itself. Grabbing one of these drinks is essential for any true Detroit visit. Meanwhile, the soda factory employed entire family lineages. Dads would spend 20 or 30 years operating the machinery, eventually bringing their boys on board to join the crew. Younger guys picked up the skills directly from their dads, using that identical machinery. This went way beyond a simple paycheck. It represented deep-rooted heritage. The crew felt incredible honor brewing this beverage, fully aware they were crafting the city's signature soda and making a real impact. During the 1950s, local officials required that waterfront property for huge civic upgrades, which featured building the massive Cobo Arena. That gigantic gathering space eventually turned into an incredibly famous local monument all by itself. Municipal leaders pitched the company an idea explaining they required the water-adjacent plot for urban expansion. As a trade, officials offered up the former event space location situated in Midtown on Woodward Avenue, making it a simple real estate exchange. The soda brand agreed, so wrecking crews leveled their cherished waterfront facility to build a modernized metropolis. Workers removed the legendary billboard and took apart the stone beverage bar, completely erasing structures that shaped the waterfront horizon for generations. However, the brand wasn't fading away. They simply relocated to construct an entirely superior headquarters. Chapter 3. Their ultimate masterpiece, the fresh Woodward Avenue facility, officially launched in 1954. Crafted by the elite local design group Harley Ellington and Day, the structure served as a perfect example of 1950s contemporary style. Featuring crisp edges, transparent barriers, and elegant aesthetics, the place looks stunning while remaining incredibly practical for the company's daily operations. This huge compound spanned 250,000 square feet, beating their previous waterfront spot by 3,000. Architects built it, maximizing both productivity and street-level viewing. It served as a bold declaration, not just a production space. The team felt incredibly confident in their beverage, eager to let the whole city witness their exact brewing methods. Its main attraction featured a 55-foot glowing billboard showing their famous gnome character Woody dumping out a frosty soda. Powering that display required 75,000 watts, shining brightly through the darkness and catching eyes for huge distances along Woodward Avenue. Locals instantly deemed it a major city monument. Everybody recognized that glow, immediately connecting it to the beloved brand. Anyone walking past the transparent exterior could easily observe the complete liquid filling procedure happening inside. Parents and kids loved pausing outside to stare at containers cruising along the conveyor belts. It looked totally hypnotic. Onlookers adored seeing 1,000 units cycle flawlessly each minute, transitioning smoothly between cleaning, pouring, sealing, and boxing stages. The executives operated with total transparency, hoping crowds would notice the pristine conditions, smooth workflows, and deep dedication poured into each serving. Their output blew people's minds, hitting 75,000 boxes daily. That meant 6 million drinks every single day, or 1,000 each minute. Running 24/7 across 3 crew schedules, the facility constantly cranked out beverages for locals and out-of-state buyers alike. Though the warehouse handled RC Cola packaging deals too, the famous ginger ale always remained their core focus. Touring the legendary soda headquarters eventually evolved into a classic rite of passage for local residents. Groups regularly cruised into Midtown, parked their cars, observed the machinery through the transparent exterior, and finally hit up the indoor snack counter. That counter dished out creamy floats, icy coolers, and newly made soda right off the belts. Each super chilled, bubbly sip packed an intense spice that literally brought tears to your eyes. Little ones observed the factory equipment while sipping their fizzy drinks, building unforgettable childhood moments. Meanwhile, the incredibly neat facility hosted a highly dedicated staff who cherished their daily tasks. Management utilized cutting-edge machinery while maintaining insanely strict standards, ensuring staff personally checked every single glass container. Experts sampled all mixtures and strictly monitored the maturation timelines, proving the brand absolutely refused to compromise. Everyone knew they brewed the nation's greatest ginger soda. Their secret weapon was the maturation phase, letting the rich syrup, spices, vanilla, and flavorings rest perfectly. Keeping the specific recipe completely classified, they rested the liquid inside wooden casks for 4 solid years. 4 entire years. This waiting period smoothed out the taste, blended everything perfectly, and delivered a rich depth that rival brands simply couldn't replicate. Despite costing a fortune and taking forever, this exact technique gave the soda its incredibly unique mouthwatering profile. Packaging stated it plainly matured 4 years in timber. This wasn't some flashy advertising trick. It represented a genuine guarantee. Reaching maximum success during the early 1960s, revenue topped $9 million in 1963, while the Woodward headquarters kept hundreds of locals employed. Their supply chain expanded well past the middle of America. Folks bought Vernors across 33 states, yet Michigan claimed 80% of the business. It truly belonged to Detroit and the Great Lakes state. You could never detach this soda from its hometown. Families locally even used Vernors as a home remedy, following a very basic routine. Tummy aches meant sipping some Vernors. Severe cases required heating it up, letting the intense fizz and ginger soothe your gut completely. Dealing with a cough or scratchy throat called for warm Vernors mixed with lemon, while rough mornings after drinking demanded freezing cold mugs of it. Local grandmas and grandpas completely trusted this cure, handing the ritual down through countless generations. Medical professionals argued it offered nothing more than liquid and mental comfort, but locals completely ignored them. The stuff just healed people. Decades of family anecdotes backed this up. Genuine components created the beverage's legendary status, clearly printed right on the bottle. Sparkling water, real sugar from cane natural ginger, and vanilla extracts, caramel coloring, alongside a few other earthy flavorings. The fizz kicked incredibly hard. In fact, Vernors packed more bubbles than almost any other soda nationwide. It contained way more spice than rival brands. Maturing the liquid inside wooden casks produced a completely unmatched taste, elevating it way past regular ginger ale. This was Vernors totally in a league of its own. The operation felt eternal, especially with the manufacturing plant standing proud since 1954. Relatives of the founder controlled the enterprise for almost an entire century. Their recipe stayed flawless and unaltered for ages. The brand appeared just as indestructible as the Motor City. Something that legendary could never vanish. Correct. Chapter 4. The purchase that kicked off the downfall. During the early 1960s, James Verner Davis ran the entire operation as its chief executive, driving massive revenue spikes during his tenure. Shareholder documents from 1963 revealed that revenue skyrocketed from roughly $6 million in 1961 to past $9 million just 2 years later. The business made incredible money, thrived wonderfully, and held deep ties to the Motor City. Then 1966 rolled around, marking the brand's 100th birthday alongside an entire century of bloodline control. 100 years brewing the city's favorite beverage, yet the founders chose to cash out. This news completely stunned the locals as the creators finally stepped aside. Ownership shifted to a syndicate of Wall Street backers, total strangers, rather than actual locals from the Motor City. These buyers viewed the soda merely as a financial asset rather than cultural history. So what drove the buyout? The founders kept quiet about their motives. Rumors suggested the leadership was getting old, without any eager heirs ready to take over the daily grind. Plus, the buyout money was massive. Operating a soda empire had also become increasingly difficult over time. Giant corporations like Coke and Pepsi started dominating the grocery aisles, leaving smaller local competitors fighting for survival. Perhaps the owners noticed the inevitable doom approaching and bailed out while the company still held serious value. Or perhaps they simply desired the payout after 100 years. Regardless of the reason the deal went through with zero public noise. Zero parties or centennial festivities took place, merely a business deal. Cash was swapped and the keys were handed over. The original creators vanished. Employees stationed at the Woodward facility found this update incredibly disturbing, having dedicated their careers to the founders. Deep bonds had formed over many years with James Vernors II, recognizing countless staff members by name. These incoming bosses were complete unknowns. Wall Street suits who never capped a single soda, never broke a sweat on the factory floor, and definitely never called the Motor City home. Staffers constantly asked themselves what would come next. The incoming regime immediately introduced boardroom strategies, budget reviews, bottom-line tracking, and productivity audits. While the founders managed the brand with genuine passion for the craft, these fresh executives managed everything through financial documents. What is the price tag on the 4-year maturation process? What savings happen at 3 years? Could we cut corners using lower quality raw materials? Each tiny detail of the brewing operation got scrutinized to maximize savings. Chapter 5. The corporate revolving door. That initial buyout stuck around for 5 years until 1971, when the brand got flipped yet again. American Consumer Products stepped in as the buyer, just another massive conglomerate filled with bosses lacking any local ties or respect for legacy. Bottom lines were their only focus. Budget restrictions intensified heavily, making the traditional 4-year maturation method seem incredibly pricey and sluggish. They slashed the timeline to 3 years. The bottle's text shifted from claiming 4 years in wood to a generic flavor aged in oak barrels phrase. This updated packaging hid the actual time frame entirely, keeping things intentionally unclear. The average drinker missed the tweak, yet the shift happened regardless. A recipe heavily refined over multiple generations was getting compromised just to hoard pennies. Fast forward to 1979, and the brand flipped once more, landing in the hands of a Cincinnati-based conglomerate called United Brands. This specific corporation focused mostly on shipping fruit and processing livestock, famously controlling the Chiquita banana empire. They managed various grocery supply chains, and suddenly they controlled a legendary soda. Having fruit executives run a ginger ale empire felt completely ridiculous to locals. The new ownership evaluated the beverage and immediately spotted trouble. The brand barely clung to a 0.2% slice of the national soda industry. It was microscopic. The regional brand kept 80% of sales completely locked inside Michigan. That geographic bottleneck terrified the suits. Board members demanded coast-to-coast availability, widespread revenue, and massive nationwide expansion. However, the soda's uniquely bold flavor completely derailed their nationwide ambitions. Out-of-state folks weren't raised on it. They considered the punchy kick way too intense to enjoy instantly. Consequently, United Brands pivoted. If the classic recipe blocked coast-to-coast growth, they would simply alter the ingredients to mirror everyday standard ginger sodas. Dilute the kick entirely. Make it totally inoffensive for consumers unfamiliar with the authentic drink. Prioritizing a nationwide footprint completely overshadowed preserving the magic that actually built the company. From there, quality tanked rapidly. Authentic cane sugar got swapped out for high-fructose corn syrup. That massive downgrade saved them serious cash. The flavor profile shifted immediately. Corn syrup brings a heavier, almost sickly sweet vibe compared to real sugar, but slashing production expenses made it worth it. Bottling millions of units means those microscopic financial shortcuts quickly snowball into an absolute fortune. They targeted the ginger next. Authentic extracts simply cost way too much. They tweaked the recipe using natural flavors, an incredibly ambiguous catch-all phrase, while actual ginger levels completely tanked. Whether any real root remained in the batch was anybody's guess. The packaging merely promised natural flavors. That signature fiery kick, defining the brand for over 100 years, got completely muted for profit. Meanwhile, authentic vanilla was traded for fake flavoring. Just another massive corner cut. The rich undertones giving the drink its unique depth got swapped for bargain bin knockoffs. The barrel aging timeline was drastically rushed or honestly just completely scrapped altogether. Naturally, corporate refused to admit what was actually happening. The bottles kept boasting about barrel aging even as those details grew incredibly murky. Buyers caught on fast. Lifelong fans who spent 40, 50, or even 60 years sipping the stuff spotted the downgrade instantly. It just tasted wrong. Even the carbonation felt noticeably weaker. That famous spicy kick lost its punch, erasing any depth. It became overly sugary, incredibly boring, noticeably flat, and completely run-of-the-mill. Frustrated drinkers complained to grocers and fired off angry letters to headquarters. Yet corporate just kept parroting the exact same denial about recipe tweaks. Yet anyone with a decades-long soda habit saw right through that massive corporate spin. Meanwhile, the Woodward facility crew had front-row seats to the entire downgrade. Workers watched cheap materials arrive while the iconic wooden casks just sat around collecting dust. It was totally obvious they were churning out a knockoff liquid, simply coasting on the brand's legacy. The floor guys genuinely attempted to raise the alarm. The big bosses tuned them out entirely since slashing expenses was the sole focus. Chapter 6. Pulling the plug. When January 18, 1985, rolled around, the legendary Woodward Avenue facility officially capped its very last run of the iconic soda. The floor staff had absolutely zero clue the end had arrived. To them, it felt like a totally normal Tuesday, just clocking in and churning out 1,000 units per minute. That was it. Following that, specific bottle operations completely flatlined. On January 19th, United Brands dropped a bombshell about shuttering the doors. They claimed operations were just relocating to the suburbs. Management called the Detroit building outdated and totally inefficient. Supposedly, a state-of-the-art building elsewhere would save an absolute fortune. The crew was completely blindsided, hit with a sudden mandate rather than an open dialogue. The facility was officially dead. On January 25th, the crew grabbed their very last paychecks. Decades of family legacies crashed down instantly. Dads and kids who spent years shoulder to shoulder on the assembly floor were suddenly ripped apart. Lifelong employees dedicating 30 years to the company, folks who mentored their own kids on the line and dreamed of retiring, they were suddenly unemployed. The buyout packages were a joke and absolutely nobody got a transfer offer. Even though the suits promised a suburban relocation, not a single position was actually set aside for the Detroit veterans at this mysterious upcoming site. Ken Erdy, a recently axed sales manager, told the Detroit Free Press the ugly truth management desperately kept hidden. The public assumes the brand is relocating out to the suburbs, but that is a lie. The company is completely defunct. Aside from a handful of guys left mixing syrup, the entire enterprise was a ghost. All that survived was a recognized logo and a basic recipe. The massive Detroit facility, the seasoned crew, and the actual production lines were entirely eliminated. The reality was way darker than anyone feared. United Brands had already secretly inked a deal offloading the manufacturing rights entirely to Pepsi-Cola. Pepsi would just churn out the soda using their own infrastructure. The rumored suburban plant was an absolute phantom. Zero positions were actually moving anywhere. That whole narrative was just slick PR jargon masking a massive brand sell-off and total liquidation. The conglomerate drained every single ounce of value from the brand before completely abandoning it. By May 1985, intense local backlash over abandoning the Motor City forced United Brands to issue a statement. Plans were announced to construct a fresh extract storage and main office near the city's eastern market. It seemed like a solid middle ground. Locals assumed the brand would maintain a footprint. Employees prayed for returning positions, but it was just another false promise. Fast forward to December 1985, and the local paper revealed that area lenders hesitated to finance the proposed Eastern Market project. Financial institutions highly doubted the brand's profitability, and ultimately that proposed site never even broke ground. Management had merely floated the idea to quiet local outrage without ever intending to actually make it happen. Pledging to remain in town was a total bluff. That Woodward Avenue factory sat completely deserted, stuffed with forgotten production gear and soda crates. While the production lines were stripped out and auctioned off, the structure itself just sat there, rotting away. That towering 55-foot mascot display stayed up, though its vibrant glass tubes had long gone completely dark. Those massive viewing windows where kids once watched the magic happen grew completely filthy, and the tasting bar was totally ripped apart. A year post-shutdown by January 1986, this beloved former icon had officially transformed into a massive urban blight. So a local vintage sign enthusiast from Royal Oak scooped up the legal permission to harvest the glowing glass from that enormous mascot. Reaching out to the beverage giant that currently held the deed, he purchased extraction access. The legendary billboard lost its vibrant tubes, leaving behind a cold, dark steel skeleton. Heading into 1987, the display appeared incredibly tragic, a bare ghost of its former glory and a stark symbol of the city's vanishing heritage. The teardown kicked off in November 1987 when a local demolition crew rolled up with heavy machinery. That beloved headquarters, occupied since 1954, was systematically leveled, with the destruction dragging on well into 1988. Once the dust settled, the lot sat completely bare. Down the road, developers would transform the block into high-end lofts targeting upscale millennials flocking to the Midtown area. Pricey apartments popped up exactly where locals once brewed the famous ginger ale. The shift was undeniable. The gritty manufacturing legacy of the city was permanently paved over by premium condos. Chapter 7. The business fallout. During 1987, the A&W brand purchased the soda trademark from its previous corporate owners. This new parent company lacked any roots in town whatsoever, and they wasted absolutely no time scrubbing away its local legacy. That beloved little gnome character, a staple on every bottle and billboard since the dawn of the 20th century, was completely axed. Fresh labels rolled out, systematically cutting ties with its Midwestern origins one step at a time. Manufacturing carried on across multiple third-party bottling plants, though absolutely zero were actually located in town. Recipe quality kept tanking. The aggressive penny pinching, initiated by previous ownership, went into overdrive under A&W, wiping out any lingering brewing standards. The legendary beverage rapidly turned into just another generic mass-produced soda on the grocery shelf. Come 1993, a massive UK confectioner absorbed the root beer firm, dragging the golden drink along. A foreign sweets conglomerate suddenly controlled the city's signature beverage. The irony was absolutely palpable. What began as a local druggist's passion project and defined the area's culture ended up in the portfolio of overseas executives who couldn't care less about its origins. Once the British firm took over, the famous aging boasts vanished completely. Since the very beginning, labels proudly declared a 4-year barrel maturation process. That brag eventually dropped to 3 years, eventually shrinking into ambiguous mentions of wood fermentation. Halfway through the 1990s, any hint of maturation was wiped from cans, with executives flatly refusing to verify if the process still existed at all. Sometime in 1996, the branding shifted to highlight a robust wood-matured flavor, completely omitting any specific time frame. Subsequent updates briefly brought back the 3-year promise, but today's packaging simply boasts a genuine flavor alongside an illustration of an oak cask. That wooden keg graphic is nothing more than marketing flair nowadays. Nobody really knows if a single drop touches real wood anymore. Following a corporate split in 2008, a newly formed beverage giant emerged. The golden soda moved directly under the Dr. Pepper umbrella. Countless board shakeups meant outsiders were calling the shots. Folks who had never stepped foot in Michigan sipped the classic recipe or grasped its magic. By 2018, Keurig Dr. Pepper materialized after a massive Green Mountain buyout of the existing firm. Today, the legendary drink sits squarely within the Keurig Dr. Pepper portfolio, a corporate entity operating out of Texas and Massachusetts, which is fundamentally worlds away from its Midwestern roots. Right now, the drink rolls off the line at a massive corporate plant located in Holland, Michigan. They push the local angle hard, despite also brewing it down south and out east. Keeping those state ties alive is purely a calculated promotional stunt. Advertisements heavily lean into its 1866 Midwestern origins. The boxes still show off that classic little mascot alongside a vintage oak cask. Every visual cue screams history and old-school charm, yet the liquid inside couldn't be further from the founder's original masterpiece. Look at the label today, and it's brutally basic, bubbly, water-processed corn sweetener and perhaps regular cane sugar. Just natural and artificial flavoring, caramel coloring, citric acid plus sodium benzoate to keep it shelf-stable. Nothing else. Zero trace of ginger or vanilla, listed simply natural and artificial flavors, which is basically the blurriest phrase you can find on an ingredient panel. Everything that gave this drink its signature kick vanished into mere specks. So what went missing? Authentic ginger and vanilla extracts, pure cane sugar. We lost 4 years of oak barrel aging, local Detroit production high benchmarks, and genuine craftsmanship. All the traits that made this soda uniquely tasty were gutted just to pinch pennies and pump up profits. Now we are left with a generic soda that only mildly resembles ginger ale, slaps the brand logo on cans, and moves units purely off sentimental longing for bygone eras. Chapter 8, The Takeaways. This brand's downfall stands apart from the Lionel trains or checker cap situations. We aren't looking at products lasting so long they bankrupted the manufacturer. This is just straight-up executive gluttony. A lucrative local favorite was dismantled by executives chasing quick cash grabs rather than lasting worth. Number one takeaway: buyout cycles ruin good products. The brand swapped hands 5 separate times between 1966 and 1985. An investment syndicate, American Consumer Products United Brands Pepsi Distribution plus A&W Beverages. Every single transaction put squeezing cash ahead of maintaining standards. Successive buyers always wondered the same thing: how do we slash expenses? What's the best way to widen margins and wring out more revenue? Nobody wondered how to preserve the excellence that put this drink on the map. The suits didn't care about Detroit or legacy. They only obsessed over quarterly revenue reports and flipping the asset. Takeaway number 2. Aggressive penny pinching absolutely murders a brand's essence. Swapping out real sugar for high fructose corn syrup kept extra cents per can. Ditching authentic ginger for artificial flavoring padded those margins further. Downgrading to fake vanilla clawed back a couple more cents. Chopping the 4-year barrel maturation down to 3 or scrapping it entirely conserved cash. Every isolated cut felt minor, but combined they utterly wrecked what made this drink incredible. What's left today is run-of-the-mill ginger pop hiding behind a classic logo. The trademark survived. The actual drink perished. Takeaway number 3, massive companies lie. United Brands claimed they were shifting operations to suburbia. In reality, they were permanently closing the city plants and handing bottling contracts to Pepsi. Management swore they'd build a fresh Eastern market hub, fully knowing they'd never actually do it. Marketing shifted the packaging from aged 4 years in wood to murky barrel-rested statements until it became just a drawing of a cask without any timeline attached. Every single phase was calculated smoke and mirrors. Executives butchered the recipe while crossing their fingers. Shoppers stayed clueless. When consumers tasted the difference and complained, leadership flat out denied tweaking the recipe. The deception ran deep. Takeaway number 4. Local staples get crushed when parent companies push for nationwide reach. This was purely Detroit's. 80% of sales stayed inside Michigan. The brass desperately wanted coast-to-coast presence, yet that unique flavor profile stood in the way. Out-of-state folks felt the bite was too intense and unfamiliar. So they watered it down into something ordinary. They threw away a century of intense local devotion for absolutely zero payoff. Takeaway number 5. The blue-collar crew always foots the bill for executive blunders. Generations of steady jobs vanished in 1985. Families with decades on the floor were handed pink slips and pennies. Veterans holding 30 years of know-how were essentially told their skills meant nothing. They bulldozed the Detroit plant. A neighborhood icon was flattened and high-end condos went up right where folks used to brew ginger pop. The toughest pill to swallow is that the label is still around. It sits on shelves nationwide today exactly like the suits dreamed of. However, the original recipe that earned all that die-hard love is dead. Veteran Michiganders who drank the authentic stuff fully understand the tragedy. Their taste buds know exactly what's missing. The younger crowd never experienced the genuine article, so they remain totally oblivious. They're sipping pure deception. The trademark held on, but its soul perished in 1985. Which brings me to this. Are you buying this stuff nowadays? Can you pick up on how much the flavor shifted? Was your grandma the type to heat up a mug when you got the flu? Or a stomachache promising it was the ultimate cure-all? Were you employed down at the Woodward Avenue plant? Or perhaps your dad was... Maybe your grandpa clocked 30 years running those exact assembly belts. Maybe your relatives have a story from the very day the plant locked up. Drop those experiences in the comments, seeing as the folks who actually lived this era need a voice. The executives bailed long ago. The building is just dust. Yet the stories remain alive and they absolutely still matter.